because so I need the chair. So go nice and easily, gently. Remember, I'm not there to see so easily what you're doing, so do take care. As always, whether I'm there or not, you just listen to your body. So make yourself comfortable and just rubbing your hands together, tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. There you are. On the other side. Part of your chest. Belly. Ease back on before they fall off. And your legs. Lovely. Settle back. Let your weight drop back into the chair. Give yourself a few moments just to recall that feeling of sinking into the chair and everything that's associated with that, the sort of release of tightness in the body. So as the middle of your back sinks into the chair, so that the rib cage can just almost flatten out. Notice whether you're holding a particular posture, where there's tightness and stiffness in your body and so on. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And just try and feel the rise and fall of your breathing. There's a nice steady rhythm. The belly, the solar plexus. And at the same time as all of this, that attention to detail, sort of gathering your thoughts into your body. And they won't stay there. We have naturally active minds, so we get distracted and thoughts capture us and draw us away. But it's really about coming back to this feeling and just getting used to the idea that just as there's a rhythm in your breathing and a rhythm in the movements, there's a rhythm in that process of, the thoughts get drawn out, they come back. They get drawn out, they come back. It's really part and parcel of the same sort of natural process. So now, coming to the upright position, forward in the chair if that's comfortable for you, but remember, always sit back and rest as and when you need to. No point sitting there feeling that your back's tightening up, and just a little bit of your weight forwards. And to begin with, focusing your attention on this yielding to the pull of gravity. So rather than sitting there trying to kind of stiffen up to hold yourself upright, feel what happens when you do the opposite. You let your hips sink into the chair. You get a sense of your legs being sort of slightly compressed by your weight. Your feet sinking into the floor, just loosen your toes, the soles of your feet. And feel this denser quality, firmer quality in your legs. As though your legs are filling up, like a balloon might fill up with water. So we've got that support from feet and hips for the upper body, a bit like a slightly off-center pyramid. And then we can think about the upper part of the body, Try and get away from this need to hold yourself upright. And if anything, you should feel slightly slumped over. Obviously, you don't want to sort of literally do that, but to begin with, just let your rib cage drop. And that denser feeling in your legs seeming to sort of just push up like a column going up through the middle of your body, supporting your upper body from within. Or if you prefer, just think of your spine, your pelvis, collarbone, and so on and so forth, supporting your body from inside. Your head just nicely poised on top of the spine. You put your chin in just a little bit, and you can either think in terms of the back of your head coming up as a result, or some people like to think of a cord attached to the crown of their head, so that they're hanging from. Either way, that helps us to counteract that sense of sort of slumping over. Your back should feel longer and broader than the front of your body because it supports the front of your body. So we don't need to be stiff in the muscles of the belly, the solar plexus, or the rib cage. Good muscle tone, but not tight and hard. And again, a nice, steady, smooth rhythm in your breathing. So it's worth spending a bit of time just with this sitting posture, or indeed the standing posture, because everything else is done, if you like, on the back of this. So we want to maintain not so much the actual physical posture, because as we move around, things will change, but the feeling of the posture, the support from the feet, support from within the body, and so on and so forth, and the spaciousness that develops when we lose some of the tightness in the body should all remain as we begin to move. So as always, starting with the different areas of the body in your head, start off with turning slowly from side to side. So maintaining that feeling within the body of space, support, and indeed of strength, really, because this denser feeling has a stronger quality to it. We need to pay attention to how we move. We often have the habit of straining when we move. There's often good reason for that. There may be an injury or reasons why we've developed that. But just remind yourself, you're in a chair. You can let your weight sink down. You've got this strong support from your legs, feet. You've got the support from your back, from the idea of a central column in the body. And reminding yourself of that every now and then means that gradually your confidence in it will grow. And your sense of it being there will grow. And then hands together and circling around your elbows. So one of the reasons that we stiffen up is because of this sort of almost unconscious sense that without that tightness, everything would just collapse. And that's why I draw your attention to this stronger feeling within the body, so that we remind ourselves, oh, it's there, we can trust it. And going forwards. When we're standing, a lot of that, of course, is down to our legs, and we don't always appreciate what's going on in the upper part of the body. The seated exercises, we can get sometimes a better sense of what's going on in the back. So again, just remind yourself this column-like feeling going up through the middle of the body. Your hands down to your sides and just rotating your arms. Imagine them round pillars either side of your body, and just rotate your arms so palms are forwards and then palms facing back. Feel the opening and closing in your chest. Now just raise your hands a little bit and see if you can rotate all the way around and see if you can still feel that little bit of change in the chest and ribs, maybe in your upper back as well. And then go back the other way. So I'm still sitting forwards in my chair. If I felt my back was starting to stiffen up, I'd comfortably go back or have some kind of cushion or pad behind me. And see that as a sort of defeat. We're not here to strain. We're not here to sort of push, push, push. It doesn't work like that in Tai Chi. Now tilt forwards and sit back. And it's important to remind ourselves of that last point, because quite often we think of exercise as something where it's kind of quite grueling and we're going for the burn and we're always trying to break records and so on and so forth. I was at an online seminar where they were talking about people returning to exercise after they've had COVID and long COVID. And one of the speakers was saying, we've got to get away from the idea that people should always be pushing. We should always be pushing people to go that little bit further. And I was thinking, well, that's interesting, because that's always how I've taught. That's how Tai Chi works. You don't push people. You let people develop in their own time. It's a very gentle, slow process. And it kind of highlighted the difference between the kind of mindset for Tai Chi and for the different mindset for something like aerobics. It's not saying that one is necessarily better than another, but to get the most out of Tai Chi, try and make that kind of switch in how you're regarding it. So just feeling the transfer of your weight. It doesn't have to be a big movement. It shouldn't be a big movement. When you go forwards, you've got maybe 60% of your weight in your legs and feet. When you go back, it's about, say, maybe a little bit more, in fact, in hips and buttocks, about 2/3 of the weight. So the actual movement, the transition, isn't that much. But by the time it's reached your shoulders and your head, it's a little bit more there. When we bring the arms into the movement, of course, it will be a great deal. Now turn a little. And again, just remind yourself to bring your attention into your body. Just try and notice the small changes. One muscle extending and extending and contracting, I meant to say, so on and so forth. And different parts of your body moving in different ways. These are the building blocks of the big movements. So we want to try and build the movement from inside using our focus awareness. Turn the other way. That awareness of small movement will also lead us to an awareness of movement, a flow, a momentum, an energy, however you care to think about it. Almost like water flowing through your body in different pathways. And then going around. And then go back the other way. and then just sit back a little and pull one heel up and step out. Heel, toes, and then. And on the other side. And again, take your time, think about how you're pushing the leg out. It's a bit of a push into the floor, very gentle. I always think of that as though I'm walking on soft sand or something like that, and rather than just sliding over the sand, I want to, each time I feel push down gently, just to find the firmer sand underneath. That kind of image. And again, it's just an awareness thing, that contact with the ground. Okay. And I think one of the great things for me about Tai Chi over the years is how it draws my attention to kind of what are really every day, for most of us, everyday actions, taking a step. We rarely think about it. And yet there's a great deal going on there, and it's worth paying attention to. Now let your hands drop down again, and once again, rotate the palms of your hands out. Again, you imagine the curve there, and tilt forwards and rotate your arms at the same time. So if you remember when we did this without the movement of the weight, the arms move just a little bit, and the independent, the separate movement of the arms is actually about the same. The rest of the movement comes from that transfer of your weight and the subsequent angling, tilting of your upper body. And one of the reasons for adopting this exercise being to just show how much movement we can get through our arms and our hands without doing very much with our arms and our hands. So once again, we're using the whole body, using the build-up of those small movements that we drew our attention to earlier into the whole movement. So no one part of the body has to do too much. No one part of the body strained. The idea of the whole body moving as one unit. Now this time, keep your hands facing back and go into Fisherman Casting there. Because your arms are swinging in this way from your shoulders, a certain amount of momentum will build up. So your hands will swing out a little bit further. But a classic error with this movement is to really have the arms coming up there. It's a forward movement. What you want to do is imagine, say you've got a kind of roll of carpet and you're going to roll it out over the ground. You're not going to throw it up in the air, you're going to roll it forwards. Nice steady rhythm, easy and gently. A sort of massaging quality of movement all the way through your body. This time, just leaving your arms out there, but the shoulders coming back, and so your hands being drawn over as though you're rolling a ball in towards your chest. And a feeling of an expansion up through the front of your body. And then the pigeon spreading its wings. And once again, this is quite obvious, I think, in some ways with this exercise. That big movement, opening and closing in your chest and your ribs. In fact, not just the front of your body, but in your back as well. Because it's, it's the opposite way around. As your chest folds in, your back opens. All the way up and down through your body. And again, a nice gentle massaging quality. So any areas that feel a bit stiff and tight, and just sort of get a sense of ease from this movement. But again, you'll lose that if you try too hard with your arms. And if you look, my hands actually don't move that far. Here, they're sort of just inside my shoulders. Here, just out, my elbows still bent. I'm not sort of going up here or anything. Try and be governed, not by an idea of how far you should be moving, but rather how far those subtle internal processes move you. And then change into pushing away. The push will start in your hips and lower back. The weight will go forwards. It's like a wave coming up. The name is pushing a wave or pushing a boat. The interesting thing to maybe think about with this is that there isn't a kind of A in Chinese language. So a more direct translation might be pushing wave, or you could say the wave that pushes. So we think of pushing against a wave, but we could also maybe think that there's this wave-like movement within the body that's creating the push, pushing the arms out. One more time. And then hands loosely fisted. Rotating, and that rotation will also, you'll feel the resonance of that in the muscles of the chest, or rather the other way around. It's that movement in the chest that contributes to the rotation. So again, taking the emphasis away from the arms and allowing the arms to become the expression of the movement in the rest of your body. And then open your fingers, turn your hands out a little bit further. You want to drop down here because that's quite a tight turn. From leaning in front of your hips and pressing forward. And here again, we can really feel the chest opening and closing. So a part of the strength of the movement that we feel through the arms is there, not because of the arms themselves, but because of the big muscles of your chest and your upper back, the movement, the rib cage. One more round. So sitting back, changing now to the vertical movements, pushing down through your feet and your hips. Again, that wave-like feeling coming up through your body and then draining away. One more. And hands out to your sides. And keep a nice continual flow in the movement. Wild goose. And parting the clouds. So our familiarity with these movements really does enable us to draw our focus into the body. When we get to a point where we no longer have to sort of consciously think about what we're doing with the movement, the sort of muscle memory is there, and what's happening within the body becomes more accessible to us and of course becomes more part of the movement. That's just an inevitable sort of process in learning. Any new movements will take a little bit of time for that to happen. It's why we always start off with the same routine. Start off with relatively simple exercises. Now change into Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. Expanding all the way through one side of your body. Again, that wave-like feeling, pushing your arm up and then drawing down. On the other side. Take your time. Just be aware that there's a slight space between moving on one side and moving on the other. It's like your attention is here and you stay there while you get to here, then your attention moves across and you start on the other side. It's like a camera, you see on documentaries and things, don't you? The camera moves slowly across the landscape. It's not an abrupt change. There's plenty of time. And this is another thing I think that is characteristic of Tai Chi, this lack of urgency, this lack of a feeling that we need to rush, which is quite common, of course. Quite difficult to counter. You will find yourself sort of jerking into the next movement, but just remind yourself that you don't need to do that. One more on each side. Good. And then your hands around in front of you, pushing in two directions. So sometimes I do, I go back and I do some of the movements in sequence. Or we could take this one, we've got within the same movement, two slightly different movements. One is here, your back is lengthening. Here we start in the same way, but then there's this kind of broadening across your back. And just see if you can remain aware of that and notice the subtle differences between each stage of the movement. And they may not seem particularly significant, but what you're doing is you're training yourself to recognize these things. Let's do one more round. Now this time, turn. So that adds a third element to these movements. And turn the other way and back. And finish by facing forward. So we've now got pushing in four directions. And again, within the same exercise, we can just observe how the changes happen within our body. Our arms are basically doing two things. They're either pushing out sideways or pushing up. Everything else, the change is somewhere between your hips and your shoulders. And also just remind yourself, weight sinking down, chances are we've kind of come up, we're stiffening up, let your hips sink down, feel that support from your hips and your feet. Do one more round like this. And then one foot out, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Be very careful not to strain in your back. Use that feeling of your hips dropping back into the chair to pull your shoulders and your head and your arms upright, rather than straining in your neck and your back to kind of push yourself up. So another thing that we gradually get more confidence in is our ability to be upright without straining. It's difficult to maintain that. Old habits die hard, don't they? And then roll your fingers in, make a hollow fist, sit back, pushing up from the hip, feeling your back lengthen a little bit, grasping the tiger's ears. A slight angling forwards here and a pulling on your arms. Very soft in your shoulders. Your arms will go out. They get pulled over. One more time. Switch sides. And then changing. Once more. Come back to the seated position again. Give yourself a couple of moments just to find this position, the qualities of sinking down and that spaciousness in the upper part of your body. Of course, you know, as always, if you need to take just a little pit stop, as it were, just to rest your back or something, then do that. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. And then let's do hit the ball in front of the shoulder. So you move forwards, you turn and you push your hand up and out. Your arm just extends out gently and draws back. And then on the other side, palm up as the arm rises. Both hands turn. So now, palm down as your hand comes down. And trying to get a sense of moving from your feet, from that central area of the body, so from that stronger area, rather than straining your shoulders or your sides or something. And again, just appreciating that stronger quality that comes from within the body. One more on each side. Then change into the slightly more expansive cow gazes at the moon. Coming down here, turning. And again, that sense of just letting your arms swing. One more time on each side. And then holding your hands across your chest. And the archer, push out with one hand, draw the bow with the other. Watch the hand as it moves away and swings over. Comes back in. And then here, transfer your gaze to the other hand. So your head turns a little bit, not too much, you don't want to tighten in your neck. And your eyes change focus. And there's a nice movement for shoulders, chest, and upper back. Quite strong. As I said before, go nice and gently and easy. One more time. And just, once again, give yourself a few moments in this position and think about not so much the technical side of it, you know, where the hips are, where the knees are, and so on and so forth, but just try and get a sort of fix in your mind the feel, particularly in the upper part of the body. It's something that we're going to want to come back to when we do the standing. As always, before we stand, just the tapping movements again, rubbing your hands together and starting on your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder and arm. Remember, these are good movements at any time. These techniques are very easy to remember. On the other side, not a bad thing to do in the morning to sort of just wake yourself up properly before you start moving around too much. Part of your chest. Breathe in. Belly. And finally again, your legs. Important to get your legs, get the feeling back into your legs before you try and stand. So quite vigorous on the legs. The big muscles of your legs will benefit from a fairly firm action. Use palms of your hands or your fists, entirely up to you. Okay, and then if you're ready, just stand carefully. As always, don't feel pushed into standing. You might want to remain seated. You can have the chair next to you for support as always. And again, just standing for a few moments, just as we were sitting, just to really fix this posture in your mind. And this is where actually having the chair next to you can be quite useful, because you've got the chair there, you can stand next to it or behind it, whatever's comfortable for you. It's quite difficult to stand, but you've all done this enough to have some sense of what you're aiming for. And we remember the feeling from when we were seated. And you just have to, you just have some support there, or stand next to a wall, so that kind of concern, that understandable concern that, well, you might just collapse or whatever, has, you've got some security there. And again, we just allow the rib cage to drop, of course, allow the weight to drop and hips to drop, and we feel stronger inside the body. And we realize that we don't need that tightness, and we can have some sense of confidence in that. And then sinking down a little, hands in front of you, pushing up. Remember, the main action here is going to be in the hips and that dropping of your center of gravity. Nice and gently. The same awareness of very subtle movements and changes within your body. And then the wild goose. So one of the key things that we're looking to really become quite natural to us is this dropping of our center of gravity. The hips and the pelvis sinking back, weight dropping down, rather than struggling to hold our weight up. And the sense that we come back to that all the time. There's the root. And then we push out a little bit. But we just allow gravity to work through our body. We come back to the root. That same rhythm, extending out and drawing back. And this sense of dropping down, changing out of part in the cloud, actually, I always think is one of the really crucial things that we get from Tai Chi. Because when we push out, however nice the movements, so we can experience this little bit of wobbling, and we learn to make our response to that wobbling sinking down and a relaxation rather than a straining. And I think that's an important change. And then the hamstring. 1 foot forwards. So now again, transferring your weight. And again, take your time. So remember I said earlier about just sort of pushing the foot into the ground. This is such a fundamental thing, to really have that sense of the ground beneath your feet. We lose it very easily. It's like our feet are a long way from the head, aren't they? And we often lose that sense of touch in our feet. And it's never going to be the same as your hands. Don't get me wrong. But you take just a little bit of time. So you sink back, you settle down in the back foot, you push gently through the front leg, and you let your weight follow on. You settle in the front leg, you push, it's like pushing into sand through the back foot, you let your weight follow you back. Now, obviously, when we walk around in normal circumstances, we don't do it this slowly, but that awareness will gradually affect your everyday movements. And at the same time as we pause, raise your toes. And when you're on the front leg, your heel. Now, what may happen when you do this is something like this. I'll exaggerate. It might be, oh, you're something like that. So take your time to find that upright posture, to let your hips drop. Your body's response will automatically be to stiffen up, to hold on. Instead of that, use the wall or your chair. Get the security to play around with this. Sinking down. And it's it reminds me very much of being in water, because I'm not that confident in water. But if I've got something to hang on to, I can remember that actually I'm more buoyant if I relax in water. But to start off with, because I don't do it very much, don't go swimming very much, I'm a bit like a kind of rabbit in the headlights in water. And of course, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. I hold on to the bars in the pool or something like that. So, oh yeah, I remember the water will hold me up if I relax. And in the same way, you remind yourself, oh yeah, if I can just sink down, soften my legs, my body will hold me up. The strength is actually there to do that. And then stepping in. Try and do this slowly. Obviously, if you feel a bit wobbly, you're going to have to move a bit faster. But just trying to maintain that stability and that alignment with gravity, the rooting down while you step. And remember, in Tai Chi, this is a shorter than normal step. So we haven't got to sort of throw the leg out. If we had to do that, then it would be much harder to maintain the root. And again, these are things that will gradually make themselves felt in your other activities. And on the other side. So again, before you move your weight, feel the contact with the ground. These are such fundamental movements, and again, we kind of forget about them. Yeah. So it's nice to come back to these real basic things and just appreciate how amazing they are, really. And then just slowly raising your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. Now, if you're comfortable with this, either going forwards or backwards, take a couple of steps. Plant the foot is the phrase that we would use. And you can always be by the wall or by your chair. And don't expect to never wobble. Everybody does. I remember feeling quite pleased when my teacher pointed that out to us all. But no, you'll wobble around. It's not the point. You're moving slowly. You wouldn't normally move this slowly. If you can get a few times when it feels stable, then that's a great advance. And then I'm running out of time. I've been talking too much. Go back to your chairs. This thing about everyday movements, remember that everything in Tai Chi is based on the normal everyday movements of the body. There's nothing, you know, it seems like quite an exotic art, but actually it's not. It's very straightforward. And there are things that we often take for granted. I remember I used to teach for an organisation that supports people who've had head injuries. And one woman in particular who came to my sessions all the time, she really worked at it. She'd had a terrible time of it. She was middle-aged and she'd been in a car accident and her husband died and so on and so forth. I mean, really hard. But she was a real fighter and she really took to the Tai Chi. She really liked the weight shift exercise we've just been doing. I remember one winter when there was snow on the ground, arriving to do the session, and it was cold outside. I came in and my glasses were steaming up, and it was a bit, it's like when it's like that. And she came up to me and she said, hey, I've been walking around my village. And I didn't take much notice. I just, oh, good. I was sort of like trying to get my coat off and that. But she would never take that kind of brushing off. And she stood in front of me, put her hand on my chest and said, no. She said, no, listen, sort of thing. And she said, I've been walking around my village. I couldn't do that last year. She'd been walking around in the snow. And I was struck by how powerful that was for her, and realized that kind of like you just take for granted that you can walk, but it's just somebody who nearly lost the power of walking. And she said that was because of you. And I said, well, she was wrong about that. It was her commitment to the Tai Chi that had done it. I think we often, just everyday actions that are so easily lost. They're all there in Tai Chi. Tai Chi can kind of remind us in a way. There's a kind of relearning process, I think, takes place, even things like this. So, don't take any of these movements for granted. Often the simplest movements can be the most interesting and the most revealing. And just settling down. Notice how gravity wants to pull your center of gravity down. Wants to sort of like make you really solid in the chair. Say once, gravity doesn't want anything, it just does it quite naturally. So we don't have to strain, we don't have to struggle for the root. Let your hands drop down. And as you begin to extend out, try and give a sense of that pulling down through your hips, through your center of gravity. Even as we push out, the potential is there to come back to that rooted feeling, and everything that is associated with that, the stability, the sort of openness and the space in the upper part of the body, so on and so forth. So just at the back of your mind, aware of that connection downwards to the ground. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as always, take care.
Yes, you too.